The story begins with a man named Dave receiving a call from Mike Stevens, the U.S. ambassador in Islamabad. During the call, Mike informs him of a dire situation. An armed rebel group has seized control of a town in Pakistan and is actively hunting down the Walters family. American missionaries whom they suspect of being spies sent by the embassy. While the accusation is true, Mike, knowing that one of his covert agents is now in grave danger, urgently requests military assistance to evacuate them. However, Dave, a military representative, initially refuses, fully aware of the extreme risks involved in entering the hostile region. Shortly after, Mike hurriedly packs his belongings, preparing to leave the embassy as hundreds of insurgents advance towards government buildings, police stations, and even nearby villages. Desperate to convince Dave, Mike emphasizes that the Walters family has risked their lives for the United States. At that moment, they're among 6 American missionaries awaiting rescue. The Walters family has already fled their home, trying to evade capture. Among them are 2 children, just 13 and 5 years old. Hearing this, Dave pauses, glancing at a picture of his own child. He reflects deeply, wondering what he would do if his own family were in such peril. After a moment of contemplation, Dave ultimately decides to assist Mike. He immediately contacts Commander Johns and orders the deployment of an elite unit stationed near the Walters family's last known location. The team, known as Warhorse Team, happens to be in the vicinity and is promptly redirected to execute the rescue mission. Meanwhile, the Walters family is fleeing across Kunar province in a green vehicle, making their way toward the Pakistani border. Without delay, Warhorse Team sets out on their mission. As the rescue helicopter crosses into the border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan, the team is suddenly ambushed. Insurgents launch RPGs at them, and one of the rockets strikes the aircraft, engulfing it in flames and causing it to spiral out of control. Just before the chopper crashes, one of the team members leaps from the wreckage and miraculously survives. That man is none other than Master Chief Mirko, the leader of Warhorse Team, known by his call sign, Warhorse 1. The scene then shifts to moments later, as Mirko regains consciousness. Still disoriented, he struggles to his feet and begins searching for the wreckage of the helicopter, hoping to find his teammates alive. He attempts to contact them one by one, but no response comes. Anxiety mounts as he realizes that every call goes unanswered. With no other option, Mirko decides to reach out to headquarters. Thankfully, his efforts are not in vain. He successfully establishes a connection with the command center, where an operator named Castle picks up. Mirko immediately reports that the helicopter carrying his team has been shot down by a terrorist group. He asks Castle to check on his teammates using satellite imagery, hoping that some of them may have survived. Unfortunately, the satellite feed reveals a heartbreaking sight. The helicopter is completely destroyed and engulfed in flames, with no visible signs of movement around the wreckage. This strongly indicates that all members of Warhorse Team have likely perished. During his conversation with Castle, Mirko spots 3 enemy fighters positioned on a hill, preparing to fire an RPG at the remains of the Warhorse Team's helicopter. Realizing the imminent threat, Mirko quickly finds a strategic position for cover and prepares to engage. With his exceptional marksmanship, he successfully takes down 2 of them, but the 3rd enemy escapes and swiftly contacts his group via radio, calling for reinforcements. Shortly after, Castle contacts Mirko again, warning him that between 40 to 60 enemy soldiers are on the route to his location. Castle firmly advises him to retreat before the situation escalates further. Initially, Mirko ignores the warning, determined to stand his ground and fight. However, Commander Johns, who is stationed at headquarters, takes over the communication line. At that moment, Johns urges Mirko to withdraw and wait for the evacuation team, unwilling to lose one of his finest soldiers, especially after learning that the rest of Mirko's team has been lost. Just as Mirko begins considering a retreat, the enemy forces arrive sooner than expected. They launch a relentless assault on his position, forcing him into an intense firefight. Despite being alone, Mirko manages to hold off the attackers, but his ammunition supply is running dangerously low, making it impossible to eliminate them all. Surrounded and outnumbered, Mirko makes a daring decision. He leaps into the fast-flowing river in front of him. The enemy, convinced that no one could survive such a drop into the rushing currents, assumes Mirko has perished. However, they're gravely mistaken. As a highly trained Marine, Mirko skillfully navigates the powerful waters and emerges from the river unharmed. He ventures deep into the forest, trekking a considerable distance until he stumbles upon a vehicle that has recently been attacked. Upon inspection, Mirko discovers that the vehicle belongs to the Walters family, the very group his team was sent to rescue. Inside, he finds Walters critically wounded, who desperately pleads with Mirko to save his daughter, Zoe. As a Marine, Mirko wants to save both of them, but Walters succumbs to his injuries. Zoe, still a small child, believes that her parents are merely sleeping. Initially, she refuses to leave with Mirko, but after some gentle persuasion, she finally agrees. They quickly depart, heading toward the evacuation point. Meanwhile, the rebels return to the Walters family's vehicle to confirm that everyone inside is truly dead. At that moment, their leader, Raam, also appears. Later, one of his men discovers footprints belonging to 2 adults and a child near the site and concludes that the American soldier who previously jumped into the river is still alive and now has Walters' daughter with him. Raam immediately orders his men to find them. However, instead of following orders right away, one of the soldiers wastes time taking selfies with the corpses. Elsewhere, as Mirko and Zoe take a moment to rest, Zoe asks about her father. She recalls his words that weapons cannot solve all problems and tells Mirko that he cannot fight evil by committing evil acts. Mirko listens intently and agrees with her statement. He gently explains that the people who hurt her father were evil, regardless of their religion. Mirko understands that all religions teach kindness, and anyone who deliberately kills innocent people is a criminal. After resting, Mirko and Zoe resume their journey toward the extraction point. Along the way, Mirko discovers a landmine trap and swiftly disarms it. Once successful, he warns Zoe to remain vigilant, as the enemy is still pursuing them. Sure enough, moments later, Mirko spots 2 enemy soldiers searching for them from atop a cliff. Ensuring Zoe is secure, Mirko quickly eliminates the threats with silent precision. As they continue their journey, the terrorists persist in tracking them along possible routes. Mirko observes enemy movements through his rifle scope, waiting for them to move on. At one moment, Zoe identifies one of them as the man who murdered her family. After covering a significant distance, Mirko and Zoe climb a hill, where Mirko reestablishes contact with Castle at headquarters. He reports that enemy forces are in pursuit and that he requires immediate evacuation. Castle informs him that they still need to travel several more kilometers to reach the pickup point. As night falls, Mirko and Zoe decide to rest in a rock crevice. To ensure their safety, Mirko sets up landmine traps in case of enemy approach. Curious, Zoe asks why Mirko is there. He explains that while on the route, his mission was abruptly canceled because his location was near where Zoe's family was fleeing. His team was redirected to extract them. However, during the journey, their helicopter was suddenly attacked, and all his comrades perished, except for Mirko, who managed to jump moments before the crash. Hearing this, Zoe said that Mirko had fallen from the sky like an angel. Mirko replied that he was no angel, but Zoe insisted, saying that he was still her angel. To help Zoe fall asleep, she asked Mirko to tell her a story about a superhero. Mirko then shared a story about his best friend, Assis, the bravest man he had ever met. Assis was a Muslim who once saved Mirko and his squad in Kirkuk when they were surrounded by enemies. During the chaos, a truck suddenly arrived, and Assis, a Peshmerga warrior, jumped out and helped them escape the dangerous situation. As a result, Mirko felt deeply indebted to Assis, but unfortunately, Assis had passed away. The next morning, as Mirko and Zoe were walking, they accidentally encountered an enemy. In a split second, Mirko threw a knife, striking the enemy's face with precision. Without hesitation, he stabbed him repeatedly until the man was dead. Witnessing this brutal act, Zoe couldn't help but recall the terrifying moment when her family was attacked. Mirko quickly pulled Zoe away from the scene before any other terrorists could track them down. Moments later, enemy forces arrived at their previous hiding spot. At that place, they found a suspicious piece of fabric. Suddenly, a landmine planted by Mirko exploded. Elsewhere, Mirko and Zoe reached the edge of a river. While Mirko was collecting water, Zoe busied herself by throwing twigs at a tree, pretending she was throwing a knife at an enemy, just like she had seen Mirko do earlier. Seeing her determination, Mirko decided to teach her a valuable lesson and began instructing her on the proper and effective way to throw a knife. Once he saw that Zoe was starting to get the hang of it, he handed her a real knife. With that, they resumed their journey. At the same time, the enemy forces were closing in on their location. As they took a brief rest, Zoe pulled out her stuffed dog, Louie, remembering how her mother had promised to buy her a real Louie when they arrived in America. Suddenly, Zoe admitted that she knew her mother wasn't just sleeping. She understood now that her mother had died, just like her father and brother. In response, Mirko reassured Zoe that everyone dies eventually, including them, but not here, not in this place. In the end, he promised they would get out of there. Soon after, the pursuing forces found fresh tracks and realized that Mirko was carrying the child. As Mirko observed the enemy's movements from a distance, Zoe accidentally crossed paths with Raam, who was on his way back to his base. When Raam tried speaking to Zoe, Mirko suddenly appeared. Sensing the danger behind him, Raam quickly concealed his communication device and explained that he was just a civilian searching for his lost goat. He claimed he carried a weapon only for protection, as the area was controlled by terrorists. Raam then offered Mirko a place to rest and food at his home, which wasn't far from there. Knowing that Zoe hadn't eaten, Mirko ultimately agreed to go to his village. Not long after, headquarters contacted Mirko, instructing him to proceed immediately to the extraction point. Mirko responded, assuring them that he would arrive on time. However, he remained unaware that he was already surrounded by several of Raam's men. Moments later, a fierce gunfight broke out. After successfully eliminating all his attackers, Mirko wasted no time in searching for Zoe. To his shock, he discovered that she had been kidnapped by Raam. It was then that Mirko realized Raam was part of the terrorist group. Recalling a previous offer Raam had made, Mirko deduced that Zoe was likely taken to the village mentioned earlier. Without hesitation, Mirko set off for the village. Along the way, he spotted one of Raam's men standing guard at the entrance. After swiftly taking down the guard, Mirko disguised himself as a terrorist to infiltrate the village, which turned out to be Raam's main base. Once inside, Mirko took down enemy operatives one by one. Eventually, he captured one of the remaining fighters and interrogated him about Zoe's whereabouts. Faced with no other choice, the captive surrendered and agreed to lead Mirko to the place where Zoe was being held. As they moved through the village, Mirko encountered several enemy soldiers standing watch. With no other option, he engaged them in a fierce battle against Raam's well-trained fighters. As a member of an elite special forces unit, Mirko remained calm and undeterred. Just as he reached the building where Zoe was believed to be held, he was suddenly shot by Tarrant, one of Raam's top lieutenants. As Tarrant prepared to finish him off, Raam appeared and ordered him to stop. Inside the holding area, Raam confronted Mirko, demanding to know the location of the helicopter schedule for their extraction after discovering a tracking device. He then revealed his deep hatred for the American military, blaming them for massacring his family and thousands of innocent civilians, including women and children. Raam questioned America's true motives, whether it was for opium, pipelines, or propping up a puppet government. Mirko coldly replied that their mission was solely to eliminate people like Raam. Unshaken, Raam declared that Afghanistan was a graveyard for invaders, where all who came would meet the same fate. He then accused Mirko of being nothing more than an American pawn, a killer sent to destroy what had once been a peaceful village. Mirko countered, stating that this was not Raam's village and that Raam himself was not even from Afghanistan. Regardless, Mirko warned that Raam would not leave the place alive. Meanwhile, in another room, Zoe was held captive under the watchful eye of one of Raam's men, a menacing figure who loomed over her. Terrified, Zoe screamed as he approached. Her cries drew the attention of other guards, prompting them to rush over to investigate, unknowingly leaving Raam unguarded. Seizing the opportunity, Mirko quickly freed himself from his restraints and overpowered Raam. He then armed himself with ammunition and weapons, preparing for the next battle, to rescue Zoe and take on the remaining enemy forces. With his expertise as a special forces operative, Mirko swiftly took down his enemies in close combat. He eliminated 2 of Raam's assistants before disabling Zoe's guard with precision. Once he had cleared the immediate threats, Mirko retrieved his tracking device and hurried to find Zoe. After following the signal, Mirko finally located the place where she was being held captive. To his surprise, the moment Zoe saw him, she called out to him as "Father." Those words struck him deeply, filling his heart with overwhelming emotion. As Mirko attempted to free Zoe, Raam, who had survived against all odds, suddenly reappeared and stabbed him. Fortunately, Mirko's battle instincts kicked in, allowing him to counterattack swiftly, killing Raam on the spot. Assured that Zoe was now safe, they prepared to leave the area. However, fate had other plans. A group of terrorists stormed the village, ready to ambush them. With years of training and experience, Mirko knew that there was no choice but to fight to the bitter end. He engaged the enemy once more, but a gnawing worry plagued his mind. He feared that Zoe would get caught in the crossfire. To make matters worse, he realized that he was out of ammunition. Understanding that their only hope for survival was to escape, Mirko decided to make a run for the extraction point atop a nearby hill. What followed was an intense chase. With no bullets left, their best chance was to flee with all their strength. Mirko carried Zoe in his arms, pushing forward despite the relentless pursuit. But as they neared the hilltop, his condition worsened. The stab wound bled profusely, draining his energy, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. Yet the promise he had made, to protect Zoe at all costs, kept him going. Sensing his struggle, Zoe did her best to encourage him, urging him to keep moving. Step by step, they inched closer to safety, but Mirko could feel his strength fading. When he finally stumbled, Mirko realized he could run no longer. In that desperate moment, Mirko made a choice. He would shield Zoe with his own body, willing to sacrifice himself so she could live. Seeing this, Zoe refused to stand idly by. Determined to fight, she grabbed a knife and prepared to defend herself, despite knowing how slim her chances were. The terrorists, convinced of their victory, approached confidently. Just as they prepared to strike the finishing blow against Mirko, a sudden turn of events changed everything. The Special Forces unit assigned to extract them arrived just in time. The unexpected reinforcements forced the terrorists into retreat, while the team's leader immediately ordered Mirko and Zoe to be transported to safety. A waiting helicopter stood, ready to evacuate them, marking the end of their harrowing ordeal. Months later, Mirko made a life-altering decision. He retired from active duty to raise Zoe, whom he now considered his daughter. Although he knew he could never replace the family she had lost, he vowed to give her the best life possible. In a heartfelt gesture, he replaced Zoe's beloved stuffed toy, Louie, with a real dog of the same name, an affectionate companion who became the newest member of their family. And with that, the film came to an end. Moral lesson from the story: being a hero is tough, But accidentally becoming a dad is even tougher. Also, if someone says they're just a farmer while holding an AK-47, don't believe them.